See, in the past few days, a heated debate has erupted on the internet. Does World of Warcraft need modern graphics, or would that completely ruin the game? We're going to watch the video in question, which shows what World of Warcraft would look like with modern graphics. We'll take a look at the players' opinions, and I'll add a bit of my own thoughts as well, which I'll actually do right at the beginning. Otherwise, it's up to you. Form your own opinion and feel free to share what's on your mind. Let's get into the video. Leave a like and subscribe for more. And what I have to say in general is that personally, I wouldn't want WoW with modern graphics. Of course, if the whole thing were to be polished up, for example, I don't know, take Assassin's Creed Black Flag, which was recently remastered. Yeah, it looks better, it looks more realistic, it looks cooler. But I think that would cause two things to happen with World of Warcraft. First, Blizzard would lose a massive number of players, in my opinion. Because it's an advantage that this game still runs on very, very old PCs. You have to admit that. So even my old laptop or whatever can run World of Warcraft. And I don't know, the players here don't feel forced to buy a new PC every 3 years just so they can keep playing WoW. That's an advantage for me. And point number 2, yes, it's not a realistic art style, but for me, that's what makes up the soul of World of Warcraft, to be honest. We can see that over the years, the graphics in here have already improved. And if you take a look here at how beautiful this skybox looks over Silvermoon, those are things we definitely wouldn't have gotten in Wrath of the Lich King. So the graphics have definitely evolved, right? You have to admit that. But this completely realistic style that other games have, that's something that never existed or will exist in World of Warcraft. And personally, I think that's a good thing. I hope it stays the way it is, because honestly, you look at different games and with some of them you recognize Minecraft. Perfect example, it doesn't have great graphics. But everyone, even people who have never played it, recognize that it's Minecraft simply because of how it looks, because it looks the way it does. That was a great sentence. It's the same for me with World of Warcraft. This art style has its own unique charm, gives the game a soul, and still, in my opinion, gives Silvermoon a beautiful look. And that would be a real shame if it were lost, in my opinion. And with that, let's get started with the video that was mentioned. It's been circulating on Twitter X in the past few days. Here we can see someone went to the trouble of putting this together, overlaying different scenarios from the game directly with a version in HD graphics. Unreal Engine 5, Super, Hyper, Giga, Deluxe, whatever. There's all sorts of stuff out there, right? I'm not really familiar with all the technical details. And I think if you look at this, these scenes demonstrate very, very well what I meant. Like right here, he's lying over this corpse and crying. And you immediately recognize, yeah, it's World of Warcraft. Whereas here, it could just be any random RPG that just came out on Steam. Like that. So you can still tell by the structures which world it's all set in. Like here, this should all be in Durotar. But I don't know, I think all of that love just gets lost because of that. Of course, such an ultra-realistic wolf in front of the gates of Orgrimmar looks way, way cooler. But is it still World of Warcraft then, or is it just any random current game with upgraded graphics? So I think that's a very, very important question in this whole story. And better graphics doesn't always mean a better game. For me personally, I wouldn't get much more enjoyment out of a game just because the graphics suddenly look more realistic. I admit, I'd probably spend the first 2 or 3 weeks flying around the whole world and checking out how my favorite places in the game look now with the HD Deluxe upgrade. But after that, I honestly don't really care. And I think, especially with the character models, I don't know. These armor sets, like here for example, just don't look right when they're realistic. And also with the orcs and other player NPCs, in my opinion, they just come across as more likable and iconic in the WoW style. I hope you know what I'm trying to say here. So it's definitely not a bad look. And I don't know, just for browsing around, I think it would be really awesome to check all of this out. Here, Grima, this looks super cool. You have to admit that. But for me personally, it probably wouldn't be World of Warcraft as I know it anymore. And I could also imagine that a lot of the flair and in the end, even the fun of the game would be lost because of that. But yeah, feel free to share your opinion about it. We also sometimes reacted to such videos on my reaction channel. Feel free to subscribe. Link is in the video description if you're interested. What I have to say is that sets like tea sets and so on, they work well in this realistic style. So more modern sets, not like with this man bear pig here. I just forgot the correct name. So this heavy armor, it does look pretty cool, but in the end, do you really need it? I'm not so sure about that. And if you look at the comments here, a lot of them are going in the same direction as what I just said. It of course looks graphically better. However, the soul is gone. It comes off as generic and has a samey feel. So yeah, I didn't read the comments beforehand, but he also says it just feels generic like any other random game, and that's the biggest part for me as well. They did the whole thing with the Lion King and it just looked terrible. I actually didn't see that at all, but even there, you know, I don't need live action adaptation movies of Disney classics or anything like that. I need the Lion King because it had that style, you know? Do you understand? And that's what I associate with it. This here, it could also be from some nature documentary, but for me, it's not the most classic Lion King. Others then say, for example, this cartoonish style is good, but it needs an upgrade. It partly looks like it's on the PlayStation 2. I personally wouldn't agree with that. But basically most people say they prefer this cartoon style. Realistic would be too generic, but there could be a few improvements here and there. And yeah, I mean, honestly, if you look at this here, because he also wrote that even the newer zones look like crap, I can't agree with that. Maybe Silver Moon is also the ultimate prime example of something that looks beautiful. But I think in the zones from the newer expansions, you can really tell that a lot has changed in terms of graphics. So there's really not much to complain about. What might be cool at some point is if they applied this style and the improved visuals to older areas as well. Because, I don't know, when you're out and about in Karajan or something like that, there are, I don't know, some corners or some objects there have more edges than an old Mercedes. So it looks very angular and polygonal. Maybe you could do something about that, but I can also understand if you want to keep the iconic look, especially since it would be a lot of work and you don't really spend much time in those areas anyway. But even here, the water and so on, I actually think it doesn't look that bad for the style that World of Warcraft has. What's your opinion on that? Feel free to write it in the comments, and with that, thanks for watching. See you in the next video, take care.